Jeff, John Lynch, an eight-time finalist now, 8 years in a row. Do you think this might be the time he gets that nod?
Well, Phil, he's on sort of rare ground here. I mean, only two times since 2002 has there been an eight-time finalist. John Stallworth in 2002 was an eighth-time finalist. He got in that year. Andre Reed, an eight-time finalist in 2014, and then he got in that year. So it's a rare occurrence for a player to have that much sort of support and not get in one of those years. I think what's happened to John is you're seeing it this year. There's been a run of first-time eligible players getting in the Hall of Fame. Three 1 year, two 1 year, three another year. There are four first-time eligible players among the finalists, and three of them, Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, and Calvin Johnson. Peyton obviously, is getting in, and the other two guys, I think people feel good about.
John Lynch, a lot of people say when you get to eight, it's more of just a matter of time, when, not if.
Over the long haul, Phil, if you are a finalist at all, history says you eventually get in the Hall of Fame. Now, how long that takes has varied, from a couple years to, Lynn Swann being the ultimate. I believe he was a finalist 14 times before he got in, and I've been in on most of those through the years. So that's the other extreme, but history has said if you are a finalist, even at least once, you usually eventually get into the Hall. But again, it's a committee is putting in more first-time eligible players in the last 5 years than it probably did in the previous 20.
The safety position historically has been really underrepresented in the Hall of Fame, but the last couple of years, that's starting to change here. Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, of course, Steve Atwater. Do you think that maybe the attention the position is getting will help John Lynch?
Well, that's always my hope. I'm the guy who stood up in the meeting many years and said, I'd like to put a safety in before I'm dead. And, but it's good to see. And I think safety represents the difficulty in discussing some of the other positions, like guard, center. We're very much in an analytic time in the league, and that has found its way into the Hall of Fame selection process. I think sometimes the selectors are more comfortable with statistics they can wrap their hands around, how many catches, how many touchdowns. And I think safety sometimes gets lost in that. And it's every defensive coach I've known over the years has always talked about how important it is. So I, for one, am glad, especially Steve Atwater. I mean, when I presented him, a lot of my presentation was based on the fact this player doesn't really exist in the league anymore, but that doesn't mean he wasn't one of the best of all time. You have to sort of talk it through the change in the game. You have to remind people this is how football was played 20, 30, 50 years ago, and you have to acknowledge that. And I think John's in that position too. His brand of safety play isn't seen a lot in the league right now because it's more of a coverage, play in space, kind of a time right now. And so I think that's part of it. You have to remind people this is how the league looked then, and this is why he's one of the best of that time. And I think that's an important part of the process.
I know that you'll be contributing to his presentation coming up here. What kind of impact did he make when he arrived here in Denver? A Pro Bowler all 4 seasons here in Denver.
Yeah, Phil, I think Mike Shanahan saw John as a leadership. Hey, this guy will help get the locker room right. He was coming off neck surgery. Much like Peyton, there was a lot of uncertainty or at least some uncertainty about, how his health would impact how he played. But Mike wanted him as sort of a really driving force in the locker room because of his experience and just how John is. He is a leader through and through. And to have Champ Bailey on that roster, Mike was thinking, okay, this is the kind of leadership I want on the defensive side of the ball. And then when John got here, he was fully recovered from his surgery. I mean, he played some of his best football in those first 2 seasons in particular, and I think he really showed and gave them a lot more than they may have expected initially. I think once he got here on the field, they were like, okay, this is going to be a really good fit, and it was. And I've always said that 2005 team, had they survived the upset of the Steelers, they would have won the Super Bowl.
I don't think we need to talk too much about Peyton Manning. Pretty much a slam dunk. What do you think that presentation is going to look like?
It'll be short and sweet, I would think. I mean, the gold standard of short presentations was probably Ira Miller from San Francisco. Simply stood up and said Joe Montana and sat down. I think that was in 2000. So that's probably that kind of performance. I think Brett Favre's presentation went about 45 seconds. I would think Peyton's would be something like that. I mean, sometimes with a player like Peyton, people want to tell stories or interactions that may be not well known. So sometimes you really get some good nuggets about these great players. And I think Peyton's would be like that. No question, he's a Hall of Famer and will look very good in a gold jacket.
Yeah, maybe he should start hosting these ceremonies moving forward or something like that too, huh?
Floyd Livell passed away here in recent time, but I used to joke with Floyd all the time about why would you take the jacket off? I would just walk around with it, all the time. This old thing. I didn't remember I had that on.
You never take that to dry cleaners.
No. Terrell Davis tells this great story of it coming in the mail. He was so excited he unwrapped it at the UPS store or whatever. The guy at the counter was like, "Wow, that's a pretty cool gold jacket." So,
yeah, you don't take that one off. That's for sure. Leggy, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insight.
Sure. Thanks a lot.